You are walking past a shop window, or perhaps you are scrolling through a travel website. You see the thing you desire, the suit, the trip, the house. You look at the price tag. Your stomach tightens. And then, almost automatically, you utter the four most dangerous words in the English language. I can't afford it. You think you are simply stating a fact. You think you are being responsible. You look at your bank balance, and the math agrees with you. But you are not just describing your reality. You are cementing it. In the world of metaphysics, the words, I can't, function like a heavy iron gate slamming shut. The moment those words leave your lips, your subconscious mind receives a direct command. Stop working. Stop looking. The search is over. When you say you can't,
Your brain literally powers down its problem-solving centers. You have relieved yourself of the responsibility to think. You have cast a spell of stagnation upon your own life. Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, famously said that "I can't afford it" is a statement that closes the mind, while "how can I afford it" is a question that opens it. One is a declaration of poverty. The other is an invitation to possibility. Even if you have $0 in your pocket right now, the phrase, I can't, is forbidden. It is a lie that validates your limitations. Today, we are going to learn how to break this linguistic habit. We are going to learn why the richest people on earth never make statements about their money. They only ask questions. Chapter 1. The Decree of Limitation. Let us consider the weight of language. It is easy to assume that words are merely descriptors of reality. You look at your bank balance. You look at the price tag. The numbers do not match. Therefore, you speak the sentence that seems most logical. You say, I cannot afford it. On the surface, this appears to be a harmless statement of fact. It seems like a responsible observation of your current liquidity. You believe you are simply reporting on the state of your finances. However, deep within the architecture of your psychology, this phrase functions differently. It does not function as a report. It functions as a decree. This is what we call the decree of limitation. When you utter this phrase, you are not describing a temporary lack of funds. You are instructing your subconscious mind to cease all operations regarding that desire. You are signing a contract with your own stagnation. Think of your brain as a relentless problem-solving machine. It evolved to hunt, to build, and to survive in harsh climates. It thrives on challenges. It constantly scans the environment for resources and opportunities. It is designed to bridge the gap between where you are and where you need to be. But it is also an efficient machine. It seeks to conserve energy whenever possible, because thinking is metabolically expensive. When you present your mind with a definitive negative statement like, I cannot afford it, you effectively flip the off switch. You have given the mind a command to stop processing. You have told it that the object in question is permanently out of reach. Consequently, the brain stops looking for ways to reach it. It stops calculating. It stops being creative. It accepts the barrier as an immovable wall rather than a hurdle to be jumped.
There is a seductive quality to this decree. When you decide you cannot have something, you experience a sense of relief. The tension of wanting something you do not possess disappears. The pressure to earn more or manage better evaporates. But that relief is dangerous. It is the comfort of atrophy. It is a sedative for your ambition. Consider the difference in mental posture when you change the phrasing. Instead of the decree of limitation, you ask a question. You ask, how can I afford this? The reality of your bank account has not changed. The numbers are exactly the same. But the psychological instruction is entirely different. A question is an open loop. The human mind hates open loops. It wants to close them. It wants to find the answer.
By asking how you force your subconscious to go to work, it begins to scan your life for inefficiencies. It looks at your spending habits with a critical eye. It evaluates your earning potential. It starts to generate ideas that were previously invisible to you. Perhaps you realize that you are spending money on subscriptions you do not use. Perhaps you remember a skill you possess that you are not monetizing. Perhaps you see a way to negotiate or trade. The solution may not appear instantly. It might take weeks or months. But the mechanism of search is active. The engine is running. You have moved from a passive state of victimhood to an active state of inquiry. When you rely on the phrase, "I cannot afford it," you are training yourself to be helpless. You are practicing the art of resignation. You are reinforcing a neural pathway that associates desire with immediate defeat. Over time, this becomes a reflex. You stop noticing opportunities because you have conditioned yourself to believe they are not for you. You walk through life with blinders on, seeing only obstacles and never the paths around them. This is not about financial irresponsibility. It is not about spending money you do not have on things you do not need. That is foolishness, not abundance. This is about refusing to let a lack of current resources become a permanent state of being. It is about acknowledging that your current financial state is a snapshot in time, not a life sentence. The next time you feel the urge to say those words, stop yourself. Catch the decree before it leaves your lips. Replace it with a statement of priority or a question of possibility. If you truly do not want the item, simply say, "I am choosing not to spend my money on this right now." That is a statement of power. It implies that you have the control. It implies that you are the one making the decision, not the victim of your circumstances. If you do want it, but lack the funds, ask the question, how can I make this happen? Let your mind chew on that problem. Let it feel the discomfort of the gap between where you are and where you want to be. That discomfort is necessary. It is the friction that creates movement. It is the spark that ignites innovation. Do not sign the decree of limitation. Do not silence the problem solver in your head. Keep the loops open. Keep the engine running. Your words define the perimeter of your potential. Do not build a fence where there should be a horizon. If you enjoy exploring the architecture of the mind and want to continue this study with us, please take a moment to subscribe. It ensures you never miss the next chapter in our investigation of human potential. Chapter 2. The Comfort of Giving Up. We often think of financial limitation as a purely external problem. We look at the numbers in the bank account and assume they are the only reality that matters. But there is a psychological component that precedes the empty balance. It is the moment you decide to stop looking for resources. This brings us to the most seductive and dangerous aspect of the phrase, "I can't afford it." It is not just a statement of your current financial reality. It is a sedative. Consider what happens physiologically and mentally when you see something you desire, but which sits just outside your current reach. Perhaps it is an investment in your education, a piece of equipment for your business, or simply an experience that would enrich your life. In that moment of desire, your brain enters a state of conflict. There is a gap between where you are and where you want to be. This creates psychological tension. It is uncomfortable. It creates a cognitive load that demands energy. Your mind naturally wants to close that gap, and to do so requires effort, calculation, and strategy. The moment you utter the words, "I can't afford it," that tension vanishes. It creates an immediate release of pressure. You can feel it physically. The tightness in your chest loosens. You no longer have to figure out a difficult solution. You no longer have to work harder, think smarter, or budget more aggressively. The problem is effectively solved by declaring it impossible. This is the comfort of giving up. It is the mental equivalent of sitting down on the side of the road because the hill looks too steep. Yes, your legs stop burning. Yes, your breathing returns to normal. But you also stop moving forward. Your subconscious mind takes this declaration literally. It does not understand nuance or temporary circumstances unless you explicitly program it to do so. When you say you cannot do something, your mind files that desire under the category of things it does not need to process. It shuts down the problem-solving centers of your brain regarding that specific issue.
Think of your brain as a powerful search engine that is constantly running in the background of your daily life. If you ask it a question, it will scour your memories, your skills, and your environment for answers. It works while you are awake and while you sleep. It highlights opportunities you might have missed. It connects dots that seem unrelated. But the statement, "I can't afford it," is not a search query. It is a command to stop searching. You have essentially unplugged the machine just when you needed its processing power the most. This habit of seeking the comfort of resignation causes deep atrophy over time. You are training your brain to be lazy. You are teaching it that whenever a financial obstacle appears, the correct response is to retreat.
You walk through life anesthetizing your own ambition because it feels safer to accept limitation than to face the anxiety of possibility. You are prioritizing the short-term comfort of giving up over the long-term discomfort of growth. And this is why the phrase keeps you poor. It is not the lack of money that is the primary issue here. It is the systematic destruction of your own resourcefulness. So how do we break this cycle without falling into financial recklessness? We are not suggesting you spend money you do not possess. That is denial, not progress. The goal is to change the internal dialogue from a statement of defeat to a question of possibility. Instead of closing the door, you leave it slightly ajar. You replace the period at the end of the sentence with a question mark. You must switch to asking, "How can I afford this?" Notice the shift in mechanics. The phrase, "I can't afford it," is a wall. The phrase, "How can I afford this?" is a bridge. It demands an answer. It forces your subconscious to engage with the reality of the problem rather than fleeing from it. Even if the answer is that you need to earn more, sell something, or wait 6 months, your brain is active. It is calculating. It is hunting for a way through. If the item truly is not within your means and is not necessary, there is another phrase that maintains your power. You simply say, "This is not a priority right now." There is a world of difference between unable and unwilling. Saying it is not a priority implies you could make it happen if you chose to, but you are exercising executive control to allocate your resources elsewhere. That is a position of power. That is a managerial decision, rather than a victim's plea. It preserves your agency. The goal is to keep the mental engine running. You must be willing to sit with the tension of an unsolved problem. You must be willing to look at a price tag and feel the discomfort of not having the funds, without immediately soothing yourself with the lie of impossibility. In that space of discomfort is where innovation happens. That is where the subconscious mind goes to work to fill the gap. Do not trade your future potential for the cheap comfort of saying, "I can't." Keep the question open and let your mind find the answer. Chapter 3. The Syntax of Scarcity.
Words are not merely labels we place upon objects. They are the software code of the human mind. We tend to view language as a passive tool used to describe the world around us.
We see a tree and we call it a tree. We see a price tag that is higher than our bank balance, and we say we cannot afford it. We believe we are simply reporting the facts of our reality. However, this view is fundamentally flawed. Language does not just describe reality. It shapes your perception of it and dictates your subsequent behavior. This brings us to the concept of the syntax of scarcity. Syntax refers to the arrangement of words and phrases to create well-formed sentences. But in the context of your psychology, it refers to the arrangement of thoughts that create your limitations. When you utilize the specific sentence structure of, "I cannot afford it," you are engaging in a very specific cognitive process. You are closing a door. You are flipping a switch in your brain that signals the end of an inquiry. Consider the mechanics of the human brain. It is an organ designed for efficiency. It consumes a tremendous amount of energy, so it is always looking for ways to conserve effort. Thinking is hard work. Problem solving is metabolically expensive. When you encounter a desire or a goal that is currently out of your reach, your brain has two options. The first option is to calculate a path to that goal. This requires creativity, memory recall, risk assessment, and forward planning. It is exhausting. The second option is to determine that the goal is impossible. This requires zero energy. When you say, "I cannot afford it," you are handing your brain a permission slip to stop working. The moment those words leave your lips or echo in your mind, the creative process ceases. You have defined the situation as absolute and unchangeable. The subconscious mind accepts this statement as a command to stand down. It stops scanning the environment for opportunities. It stops calculating the value of your time. It stops assessing assets you could liquidate or skills you could leverage. You have declared the matter closed. This is why the syntax matters. The statement is a conclusion. It is a period at the end of a sentence. It brings a sense of finality that aligns with the comfort of giving up, which we discussed previously. It feels safe because it absolves you of the responsibility to act. If you cannot do it, then you are not to blame for not doing it. It is a defense mechanism disguised as financial prudence. To break this pattern, you do not need to become reckless. You do not need to spend money you do not have. You simply need to change the syntax. You must replace the statement with a question. Instead of saying, "I cannot afford it," you must train yourself to ask, "How can I afford it?" Notice the shift in cognitive demand. A statement shuts the door, but a question kicks it open. When you ask how, you force your brain to switch from passive observation to active problem solving. The subconscious mind creates a query loop. It begins to look for gaps between where you are and where you want to be. Perhaps the answer is that you need to earn an extra $500 this month. Now the brain has a specific target. It moves away from the abstract feeling of poverty and toward a concrete, mathematical problem. Problems have solutions. Scarcity is a state of being, but a math problem is just a puzzle to be solved. The question, "How can I afford it?" might lead you to realize that you cannot afford it right now, but you could afford it in 3 months if you altered your spending habits. It might lead you to realize that the item is not actually worth the effort required to obtain it. That is a valid conclusion. But there is a massive difference between deciding something is not a priority and accepting that you are powerless to obtain it. The syntax of scarcity reinforces a self-image of helplessness. It tells you that you are the victim of your circumstances. The syntax of possibility places you in the driver's seat.
It reminds you that your financial situation is a result of variables, and variables can be changed. You must become vigilant about the words you speak to yourself.
Every time you say, "I cannot," you are cementing a brick in the wall that surrounds you. You are validating your own limitations. You are teaching your brain that barriers are permanent rather than temporary obstacles. The next time you see something you want, whether it is an investment, a trip, or an object, catch yourself before the reflex kicks in. Do not allow the sentence of limitation to form. Pause and ask the question, how would I do this? What would need to happen? What would I need to trade? Even if you decide not to pursue it, the exercise keeps your mental faculties sharp. It keeps the software of your mind running on a program of expansion rather than a program of restriction. Change the syntax, and you change the operation of your mind. Chapter 4. The one-word pivot. We have examined how the syntax of scarcity wires the brain for resignation. We have seen how language shapes the walls of your reality. Now we arrive at the mechanics of escape. This is the moment of the pivot. It requires a subtle but profound shift in your internal dialogue. It is not about lying to yourself or pretending to have resources you do not possess. It is about changing the grammatical structure of your thoughts to alter the chemical response of your brain. When you utter the phrase, "I cannot afford it," you are making a declaration of permanent status. You are stating a fact about your reality that your subconscious mind accepts without argument. The moment those words leave your lips or echo in your mind, your brain stops working on the problem. You have effectively told your mental faculties that there is no work to be done here. You have closed the file. The reticular activating system, which filters your perception of the world, shuts down its search for opportunities related to that desire. The physiological result is a release of tension, but it is the tension of defeat. You feel a momentary relief because you no longer have to strive, but you have paid for that relief with your potential. The one-word pivot challenges this paralysis. It replaces the period at the end of the sentence with a question mark. Instead of the decree, "I cannot afford it," the pivot demands you ask, "How can I afford it?" This seems like a trivial semantic game, but the psychological difference is immense. The human brain is designed to solve problems. It is an engine of pattern recognition and solution finding. When you pose a question, your mind essentially experiences an open loop. It cannot rest until it closes that loop. By asking, "How can I afford it?" you compel your subconscious to scan your environment for resources. It begins to calculate. It looks at your time, your skills, your assets, and your spending habits. You might find answers you do not like. You might realize that affording the object requires working extra hours, selling something you own, or cutting a different expense. The answer might still be no, but it is a reasoned, active no, rather than a passive default. You are engaging with reality as a negotiator, rather than a victim. There is another variation of the pivot that is equally powerful. It involves replacing the word can't with the word choose. Often when people say they cannot afford something, what they actually mean is that they are choosing to prioritize their money elsewhere. This is a crucial distinction. Saying, "I choose not to spend my money on this right now," restores your agency. It reminds you that you are in control of your resources. You are not broke, you are simply prioritizing. This removes the sting of poverty and replaces it with the dignity of strategy. Consider the difference in posture. The person who says, "I cannot afford it," shoulders slump and eyes look down. They are at the mercy of external prices. The person who says,
"I am not prioritizing that purchase right now," stands upright. They are the executive of their own finances, making allocation decisions. The external reality has not changed. The bank balance is identical in both scenarios.
Yet the internal reality has shifted from helplessness to command. You must understand that your subconscious mind takes your instructions literally. It does not understand sarcasm or nuance. If you repeatedly affirm your inability to generate resources, your mind will blindly obey that command by blinding you to opportunities. It will filter out the job posting, the investment idea, or the creative solution because you have already instructed it that such things are useless to you. You are the captain of the ship, and if you order the engines to stop, the crew will not argue. Therefore, you must adopt a vocabulary of possibility. You do not have to buy everything you see. You simply have to stop affirming your own limitations. Replace the definitive statement of lack with a question of possibility. Change the narrative from one of insufficiency to one of allocation. When you walk away from a purchase, do not tell yourself you are too poor to have it. Tell yourself you are choosing to build wealth elsewhere. This pivot is the bridge between the comfort of giving up and the difficulty of growing. It forces you to confront the gap between where you are and where you want to be, not as a canyon you cannot cross, but as a puzzle you have not yet solved. It keeps the neural pathways of innovation open. It ensures that when the means to afford your desires finally appears, you are awake enough to see it. Chapter 5. Agency over absence. We have arrived at the threshold of a fundamental psychological shift. This creates the bridge between merely understanding the problem and actively restructuring your mental architecture. We call this concept agency over absence. Consider the sensation of walking into a store and seeing an item you desire but lacks the funds to purchase. The reflexive response is almost immediate. It rises from the pit of the stomach and forms words before you have even processed the emotion. You say, "I cannot afford it." On the surface, this appears to be a statement of fact. You look at the price tag. You look at your bank balance. The math does not add up. Therefore, you conclude that the statement is true. However, in the realm of psychology and behavioral conditioning, this statement is far more than a mathematical observation. It is a decree. It is a resignation letter signed by your conscious mind and filed away by your subconscious. When you say, "I cannot afford it," you are speaking the language of absence. You are defining your reality by what is missing. You are highlighting the void. The danger here is not in the lack of money itself, but in how your brain processes the statement. The human brain is an incredibly efficient machine designed to conserve energy. When you present it with a closed door, it stops looking for a way through. The phrase, "I cannot afford it," is the ultimate closed door. It shuts down the creative problem-solving faculties of your mind. Your subconscious hears this command and effectively says, "Understood. We cannot do this. Therefore, we do not need to think about how to do this. We do not need to look for opportunities. We do not need to evaluate our spending habits or seek new income streams. The case is closed. The tension of desire is resolved by the anesthesia of impossibility." This is where we must introduce the concept of agency. Agency is the capacity of an individual to act independently and to make their own free choices. It is the opposite of helplessness. When you focus on absence, you are a victim of your circumstances. When you focus on agency, you are the manager of your resources. The goal is to stop confirming your own limitations and start exercising your executive function. You must change the script. You must replace the passive admission of defeat
with an active declaration of priority. The next time you are tempted to say, "I cannot afford it," you will pause. You will engage the one-word pivot we discussed previously, and then you will complete the sentence with a new syntax. You will say simply, "That is not a priority for me right now." Listen to the difference in those words.
I cannot afford it implies that an external force creates a barrier you are too weak to cross. That is not a priority implies that you have looked at your resources, and you have looked at the item, and you have made a calculated executive decision. You are choosing not to buy it. You are not unable. You are unwilling based on your current strategic goals. Another powerful alternative is the phrase, "I am choosing to allocate my resources elsewhere." This statement retains your dignity. It reminds your subconscious that you are in charge of the capital you do possess, regardless of how small that amount may be. Even if you only have $10 to your name and the item costs $100, you are not buying the item because you are prioritizing food or rent or savings. You are making a choice to protect your future over satisfying a momentary impulse. This may seem like a subtle semantic game, but it has profound material consequences. When you tell yourself you are choosing how to spend your money, rather than being restricted by a lack of it, you keep your mind in an active state. You remain in the driver's seat. The problem-solving engine of your brain remains running. It keeps you alert to the fact that your financial situation is a result of allocation, not just deprivation. If you constantly reaffirm that you cannot afford things, you train your brain to accept poverty as a permanent trait of your identity. You become a person who cannot. But when you say this is not a priority, you reaffirm your identity as a strategist. You become a person who decides. The subconscious mind takes everything personally. If you feed it a narrative of helplessness, it will construct a reality of stagnation. It will blind you to the small avenues of progress that sit right in front of you. But if you feed it a narrative of choice, it seeks validation for that choice. It looks for ways to optimize the resources you have. It begins to ask, how can I make this a priority if I truly want it? That question is the spark of wealth creation. How can I implies that a solution exists. It demands an answer. It forces the brain to scan the environment for opportunities and leverages. So we move away from the absence. We stop counting the empty space. We step fully into agency. We acknowledge that every time we keep our money in our pocket, we are not suffering a loss. We are executing a strategy. We are not too poor to buy the distraction. We are too disciplined to sacrifice the goal. This is the stance of agency, and it is from this stance alone that financial trajectory can be altered. Chapter 6. The Not Yet Framework. We have arrived at the fulcrum of your financial psychology. We have dissected the reflexes that drain your wallet and the decrees that limit your horizon. We have exposed the comfort of surrender and the syntax that keeps you small. Now we must construct the bridge that carries you from a state of lack to a state of acquisition. This brings us to the segment we call the Not Yet Framework. Consider for a moment the absolute finality of the phrase, "I cannot afford it." When you speak these words, you are not merely describing the contents of your bank account. You are issuing a dismissal. You are banging a gavel in the courtroom of your mind. The verdict is guilty, and the sentence is stagnation. The moment you declare that you cannot afford something, your brain reacts with a profound sense of relief. It is the relief of a worker who has been told the job is canceled. If you cannot afford it, then there is no problem to solve. There is no equation to balance. There is no need for ingenuity or extra effort. Your subconscious mind, which is biologically wired to conserve energy, receives the command to shut down. It files the desire away under the label of impossible and turns off the lights. This is why the phrase is so dangerous. It masquerades as financial responsibility, but in reality, it is mental retirement. You are telling your cognitive machinery to stop looking for resources. The Not Yet framework offers a subtle but radical adjustment. It requires you to act as an editor of your own internal monologue. You must delete the period at the end of the sentence and replace it with a comma. You never say, "I cannot afford it." You say, "I cannot afford it yet." This addition of a single word changes the neurological landscape entirely. While the former phrase is a statement of permanent condition, the latter is a statement of temporary timing. When you say "not yet," you are implicitly stating that the acquisition is inevitable. You have moved the purchase from the realm of fantasy to the realm of scheduling. Your subconscious mind cannot rest when it hears "not yet." It understands that the file is still open.
It understands that there is a gap between your current reality and your projected future, and it immediately begins to scan the environment for ways to close that gap. This is not mysticism. This is focus. This is the reticular activating system in your brain, filtering out distractions to find opportunities that align with your stated intent. Think of an architect staring at an empty lot. If the architect says, "I cannot build a skyscraper here," the project dies before the first sketch is drawn. But if the architect says, "I cannot build the skyscraper yet," the mind naturally asks the follow-up questions. What is missing? Do we need more steel? Do we need a permit? Do we need more funding? The focus shifts from the impossibility of the structure to the acquisition of the components.
When you apply this to your finances, you reclaim your agency. You cease to be a victim of your current balance sheet and become the manager of your future cash flow. You look at the investment or the asset and you acknowledge the objective reality that you do not possess the funds at this exact second. That is honesty. But you refuse to let that snapshot define your potential. There are other phrases that serve this same function. Instead of the flat denial of "I can't," you might ask, "How can I afford this?" This turns a statement into a query. The human brain is a problem-solving engine that hates an unanswered question. When you ask how, you force your intellect to run simulations. You might realize you can afford it if you cut a different expense. You might realize you can afford it if you secure one new client.
The path appears only because you asked for it. Another powerful alternative is to say, "This is not a priority right now." This phrase is potent because it implies that you have the power to choose. It suggests that you could afford it if you wanted to, but you are allocating your resources elsewhere by choice. It places you in the driver's seat. You are not too poor to buy the item, you are simply too disciplined to buy it today. This is the essence of the "not yet" framework. It is the refusal to accept a temporary lack of funds as a permanent character flaw. It is the understanding that wealth is a process, not a static event. You must remain vigilant. The old neural pathways are deep and well-worn. You will feel the reflex to say, "I can't," when you see a price tag that intimidates you. You will feel the desire to retreat into the safety of limitation. You must catch that thought before it becomes speech. You must override the reflex. Speak the words that imply growth. Speak the words that assume a future where your capacity is expanded. By insisting on "not yet," you define yourself not by what you lack today, but by what you are preparing to build tomorrow.
You keep the door unlocked. You keep the lights on. You keep the mind working on the puzzle until the pieces fit. Chapter 7. Igniting the Engine. The moment you utter the phrase, "I can't afford it," you have done something far more damaging than merely stating the balance of your bank account. You have turned off the ignition. You have engaged the parking brake on your own intellect. Think of your mind as a high-performance engine designed for one specific purpose. That purpose is problem-solving. Your brain is an evolutionary marvel, capable of calculating complex social dynamics, navigating physical threats, and innovating solutions to resource scarcity. It is designed to work. It wants to run. But like any engine, it requires a spark to start the combustion process. When you look at a price tag or an investment opportunity and immediately declare, "I can't afford it," you are effectively cutting the fuel line. You are issuing a command to your subconscious mind. You are telling it that the problem is unsolvable, and therefore it requires no further energy. You are granting your brain permission to stop working. This is the mechanical tragedy of the statement. It is a sedative. It allows you to mentally check out.
The subconscious mind is an obedient servant. It does not understand nuance or irony. It takes your inputs as literal directives. If you tell it that a goal is impossible, it will cease all operations related to that goal. It will stop scanning your environment for opportunities. It will stop connecting dots between your skills and potential income. It will literally create a blind spot where a solution might have existed. Consider the difference between a statement and a question. A statement is a closed loop. It is a period at the end of a sentence. It resolves the tension. If you say, "I can't do this," the tension creates a feeling of defeat, but the cognitive load is gone. You no longer have to think about it. You can go back to watching television or scrolling through your phone because the issue has been settled. You have declared yourself incapable. Now consider the question. A question is an open loop. It creates psychological tension. It demands closure. When you switch the phrase from "I can't afford it" to "How can I afford it?" you are turning the key in the ignition. You are demanding that the engine turns over. Suddenly, your subconscious is given a task. It must resolve the open loop. It begins to scan your reality for data. It starts looking at your spending habits, not as fixed laws, but as variables. It looks at your spare time, not as leisure, but as inventory. It begins to simulate scenarios. What if I worked an extra shift? What if I sold the second car? What if I learned a new skill? This is not magic. It is simply the allocation of attention. The person who says, "I can't afford it," walks past a help wanted sign and does not see it.
Their brain filters it out because it is irrelevant to a person who has already accepted their limitation. The person who asks, "How can I afford it?" sees the same sign, and their brain highlights it as a potential answer to the question they have been asking. You must understand that affordability is rarely a binary state of fact. It is usually a question of priority and creativity. When you use the language of scarcity, you mask your choices as impossibilities. You strip yourself of agency. You frame your financial situation as something that is happening to you, rather than something you are actively managing. To ignite the engine, you need to replace the syntax of defeat with the syntax of strategy. You need alternative phrases that force your brain to engage with the problem, rather than retreat from it. Instead of saying, "I can't afford it," try saying, "How can I make this work?" Instead of saying, "That is too expensive," try asking, "Is this a priority for me right now?" Instead of saying, "I don't have the money," try asking, "What is the path to acquiring the capital?"
Notice how these alternatives shift the burden. They move the weight from the external world back onto your shoulders. They force you to evaluate the trade-offs. Perhaps you truly do not want the item enough to do the work required to get it. That is a valid choice, but it is a choice. It is not an inability. When you say, "I can't," you are playing the victim of circumstance. When you ask how, you are the architect of your circumstance. This simple linguistic pivot changes your neural architecture over time.
If you constantly demand solutions from your brain becomes better at finding them. If you constantly feed it excuses, it becomes better at rationalizing failure. The engine is always there. The horsepower is available. But it will sit in the driveway, rusting into oblivion, as long as you keep walking away with the keys in your pocket. You must stop using language that anesthetizes your ambition. You must stop commanding your subconscious to sleep. The world is full of resources, and your mind is capable of gathering them, but only if you issue the command to start the search. You must reject the comfort of the full stop and embrace the jagged, difficult uphill climb of the question mark. That is how you ignite the engine. That is how you begin to move. Chapter 8. The Opportunity Filter. Consider for a moment the sheer volume of data flooding your senses at this very instant. Your eyes take in colors and shapes. Your ears process background hums and distant conversations. Your skin registers the temperature of the air and the texture of your clothing. If your conscious mind attempted to process all this information simultaneously, you would collapse from overstimulation. To protect you from this chaos, the brain employs a sophisticated gating mechanism. It acts as a bouncer at the door of your awareness. It decides what gets in and what stays out based on what you have deemed important. This mechanism is what we shall call the opportunity filter. This filter is the reason you can walk down a busy street and navigate the crowd without thinking, while completely missing the new shop that just opened on the corner. You did not see the shop because you were not looking for it. Your brain decided it was irrelevant data and edited it out of your perception. The shop was physically there. Photons bounced off its sign and hit your retinas. But your mind deleted the image before it ever reached your conscious thought. You were effectively blind to it. Now we must apply this physiological reality to your finances. When you utter the phrase, "I cannot afford it," you are not merely describing your current bank balance. You are programming the filter. You are telling that dutiful bouncer at the door of your mind that the object of your desire is irrelevant. You are categorizing it as impossible. Once you classify something as impossible, your brain stops processing data related to it. This is a biological energy-saving measure. Thinking requires calories. Problem-solving consumes glucose. If you state definitively that you cannot do something, the brain sees an opportunity to conserve energy. It shuts down the search for a solution because the verdict has already been delivered. The case is closed. This is the treacherous nature of the opportunity filter. When you say you cannot afford it, you do not just close your wallet, you close your eyes. Imagine two individuals walking through the same marketplace. One has resigned themselves to poverty. They have repeated the mantra of limitation for years. The other is actively asking how they might acquire the resources they need. They walk the same path. They see the same people, but they live in two completely different worlds. The resigned individual sees only obstacles and closed doors. They see price tags that are too high. They see a world that denies them entry.
Their filter has been set to block out opportunity. The inquiring individual has set their filter to scan for solutions. Because they are asking how it can be done, their mind highlights different data points. They notice a help wanted sign in a window. They overhear a conversation about a business need they could fulfill. They see a bundle of items being sold for less than their resale value. The opportunity was present for both people. It was physically there in the material world. But the first person was neurologically incapable of seeing it. Their declaration of inability rendered the solution invisible. This is why the phrase, "I cannot afford it," is so dangerous. It is a command to your subconscious to stop working. It creates a scotoma, or a psychological blind spot.
It obscures the pathways that would lead you out of your current situation. You become trapped, not by the lack of resources, but by a self-imposed blindness that prevents you from recognizing the resources that are already within your reach. The tragedy of this mindset is that it validates itself. You say you cannot afford it, so you stop looking for ways to afford it. Because you stop looking, you never find new income streams. Because you never find new income streams, you remain unable to afford it. You have created a loop of scarcity that feels objective and real, but is actually sustained by your own cognitive architecture. To dismantle this, you must understand that your mind is a search engine that never sleeps. It will find whatever you tell it to look for. If you focus on why you are stuck, it will dutifully provide you with a list of reasons why you are a victim. It will point out every unfair advantage others have. It will highlight every barrier in your path. It will prove you right. But if you change the input, the search engine produces different results. When you stop stating a fact and start asking a question, you force the filter to open. You permit your brain to perceive the avenues of exchange and value creation that were previously blurred out. You must realize that the world is saturated with value. Money is moving from hand to hand every second of every day. Solutions to your financial constraints exist in the physical world right now. They are not magical. They are practical and logical and tangible. But you cannot seize what you cannot see. The opportunity filter is always running. It is always editing your reality. The question you must ask yourself is not whether you have the money in your pocket at this exact moment. The question is whether you have programmed your mind to spot the path to the money, or if you have commanded it to keep you blind. The pivot happens when you realize that your blindness is a choice, and you have the authority to adjust the lens. Chapter 9. The Inheritance of Language. We tend to think of inheritance as a physical transfer. We imagine a heavy box of silverware passed down through generations, or a piece of land with a deed, or perhaps a sum of money left in a trust. We look for these tangible assets to define what we have received from those who came before us. But the most enduring inheritance is often the lightest thing in the world. It is made of air. It is made of sound. It is language. Long before you understood the concept of a bank account or a salary, you were taught how to speak about money. You inherited a vocabulary of value and a syntax of survival. For many of us, this inheritance took place in the mundane theater of a grocery store aisle or at the kitchen table while bills were being opened. Picture the scene. You are a child standing in a store. You reach for something bright and desirable. It is a small thing, but to you it feels essential. Then comes the voice from above. It is likely a parent or a guardian. The voice is not necessarily angry, but it is firm and perhaps tired. It delivers the verdict. We cannot afford it. That sentence does not land on your young mind
as a temporary mathematical observation.
It does not sound like a strategic decision for that specific month. It lands as a definition of reality. It tells you that your desires are dangerous because they lead to the pain of rejection. It tells you that money is a scarce resource that exists outside of your control. It tells you that the proper response to a price tag is immediate surrender. Your subconscious mind is a dutiful archivist. It recorded that moment with high fidelity. It filed that phrase away under the category of absolute truths. It learned that there is a wall between you and what you want, and that the wall is permanent. Now, decades have passed. You are no longer that child in the aisle. You have your own income. You have your own agency. You have the ability to generate resources. Yet, when you are faced with a financial challenge or a potential investment, the old recording plays instantly. The voice might sound like yours now, but the cadence belongs to someone else. It belongs to a lineage of limitation. When you say you cannot afford something, you are not just describing your current cash flow. You are reenacting a family ritual. You are proving your loyalty to the history of your upbringing. This inheritance is treacherous because it disguises itself as prudence. You think you are being responsible. You tell yourself that you are just stating the facts. But the subconscious mind does not deal in facts. It deals in commands. When you utter the phrase, "I cannot afford it," you are issuing a stand-down order to your brain. You are telling your problem-solving faculties that their work is done. The subconscious hears this command and accepts the defeat. It says, "Very well. The master has decreed that this is impossible. We shall stop looking for solutions." The mental engine shuts down. You do not look for ways to increase your income to meet the challenge. You do not analyze the value of the purchase versus the cost. You do not look for creative trade-offs or alternative financing. You simply accept the wall, just as you did when you were 5 years old. You have allowed a ghost from the past to dictate your financial present. This is how poverty becomes cyclical. It is not just about a lack of funds. It is about a surplus of limiting language. The parents say it to the children, and the children grow up to say it to themselves, and eventually they say it to their own offspring. The baton is passed. The script is memorized. The possibility of expansion is suffocated by a sentence that was never true in the absolute sense. Breaking this inheritance requires a disruption of language. You must refuse to accept the heirloom. This does not mean you must recklessly buy everything you see. That is financial foolishness. It means you must change the narration of your refusal. You must stop acting as the victim of your wallet and start acting as its manager. If you do not have the funds, the statement is not that you cannot afford it. The statement is that you are choosing not to purchase it at this time. Or perhaps the statement is that you are currently prioritizing other capital allocations. Feel the difference in the weight of those words. One is a statement of weakness and inability. The other is a statement of executive choice. When you say you choose not to buy, you retain your power. You acknowledge that the money could exist if you made different choices or exerted different efforts. You are not a helpless child staring up at a parent. You are the architect of your own economy. By changing the words, you break the loyalty to the past. You tell your subconscious mind that you are not bound by the limitations of your ancestors. You are simply making a strategic decision. This small shift in syntax keeps the mental engine running. It keeps the door open for future growth. It creates a new inheritance, one defined by agency rather than absence. Chapter 10. Compound Interest of Thought. Most people understand the mathematics of money.
We are taught early in life that a small sum invested wisely will grow into a fortune given enough time.
We call this compound interest. It is a principle of accumulation where the interest itself earns interest. The curve starts flat and unassuming, but eventually shoots upward with exponential force. We respect this law when it comes to our retirement accounts or our debts. But few people realize that this same mathematical law governs our psychology. There is a compound interest of thought. When you look at a price tag and instinctively mutter that you cannot afford it, you have made a small deposit into an account of limitation. On its own, this single thought is negligible. It is a penny in the bank. It seems to cost you nothing. In fact, it might even feel responsible or prudent in the moment. You walk away feeling that you have saved money and avoided risk. However, you must look at the mechanics of what just happened in your brain. When you make the declarative statement that you cannot afford something, you are issuing a command to your subconscious mind. You are essentially telling your brain that the calculation is finished. You have defined your reality as fixed and the problem as unsolvable. Because the brain is an efficiency machine, it follows the path of least resistance. Since you have declared the door closed, the brain stops looking for the key. It powers down its problem-solving engines. It conserves the energy it might have used to find a solution, and instead files the desire away under the category of things that are impossible for you. This is where the compounding effect begins. If you do this once, it changes nothing. But thoughts are rarely isolated events. They are habits. If you say these words daily or weekly, you are investing in a pattern. You are confirming a worldview. The first time you say it, you are merely stating a current financial fact. The 100th time you say it, you are reinforcing a belief about your own capacity. The 10,000th time you say it, you have constructed a rigid identity. You have built a neural superhighway that bypasses creativity and leads directly to resignation. Consider the trajectory of two individuals over the course of 20 years. The first individual sees a desire and immediately says, "I cannot afford it." Their brain shuts down and they move on. They experience a moment of relief because they do not have to stretch themselves. Over 2 decades, they practice this mental shutdown thousands of times. By the time they are 50 years old, their mind has atrophied. They have trained themselves to be blind to opportunity. They have compounded their passivity into a massive deficit of potential. They are poor not just because of their income, but because they have systematically dismantled their own agency. Now consider the second individual. They see the same desire and they do not possess the money to buy it. The material reality is identical. But instead of the statement, they use the question. They ask, "How can I afford this?" This is a deposit into a different kind of account. This question creates a psychological tension. The human brain dislikes unresolved questions, and it immediately goes to work to close the loop. It begins to scan the environment for resources. It evaluates skills. It considers trade-offs. Most of the time, this person will not buy the item immediately. The answer to the question might be that they need to increase their income, or learn a new trade, or save for 6 months. The outcome of the purchase matters less than the activity of the mind. By asking the question, they are exercising their resourcefulness. They are demanding that their brain function at a higher level. Over 20 years, this second individual compounds their ingenuity. They become faster at spotting connections. They become more resilient in the face of lack. They do not accept the current balance of their bank account as the final verdict on their life. They view their lack of funds as a temporary puzzle to be solved,
rather than a permanent state of being. This is the hidden danger of the phrase, "I cannot afford it." It is not just a description of your wallet. It is a prescription for your future.
You are investing in your own helplessness. The interest on that investment is paid out in lost opportunities and a shrinking world. You must understand that your internal dialogue is the architect of your reflexes. If you train yourself to surrender at the first sign of a price tag, you will eventually surrender at the first sign of any difficulty. To break this cycle, you do not need to become delusional. You do not need to spend money you do not have. You simply need to change the syntax of your internal monologue. You must stop making statements that end the conversation and start asking questions that begin the work. You must stop investing in the compound interest of scarcity and start banking on the compound interest of solution. Final chapter: the open door policy. This brings us to the final transformation, which we call the open door policy. When you definitively state that you lack the funds for something, you are effectively slamming a door on your own cognitive potential. You are instructing your brain to cease all operations regarding that specific desire, because the conclusion has already been reached. The alternative approach is not to recklessly spend money you do not possess, but to leave the mental door ajar. By replacing a statement of finality with an open inquiry, you force your mind to stay engaged. You switch from a passive acceptance of limitation to an active state of problem solving. This is where true agency begins. You are no longer the victim of your bank account, but the architect of your future resources. It is a practical psychological adjustment that transforms barriers into puzzles waiting to be solved. As you practice this daily, you will notice that the anxiety of scarcity is replaced by the focus of strategy. Keep the door open long enough, and eventually your mind will find a way to walk through it.